In this episode, Living with Constant Harassment by Alan Barker. Sex is also a natural process, as is farting, masturbation, defecation, burping, spats with people, fantasy, and so forth. The rapist torturers try to turn this against their victims. They constantly attempt to demean their victims. Worrying and anxiety are also normal human emotions. The torturers, though, try to turn all of these human properties against their victims. One technique the Nazi pigs use is to try to reinforce anything you might worry about or feel anxious about. It is like taking a dynamical system and driving it at its natural frequency in order to purposely destroy it. Of course, this is not to say the idiots know anything about dynamical systems. If you ever read Lord of the Flies in junior high school, you know about the level that these pig idiots operate at. But when they rape your brain to inflict such ridicule and hatefulness, it sets up positive feedback processes in the brain that constitute torture. They will purposely injure you and then pick at your scabs if you start to heal. This process also happens because you know damn well you are under surveillance and the pig ridicule squad is there to taunt you. Try not thinking about something you are conditioned with cattle prods into knowing will result in harassment. You know the torturers will zap you, that is why they go do with triggers at times, but it is like not thinking of a pink elephant on command. Ins produce yangs, so to speak. Transcending the ins and yangs is hard enough without the torture. The torturers treat your personal, private, internal speech as if it were your public speech. They try to subject you to all the ignorance and political correctness and everything else that someone at a podium in a public place might be subjected to. The sadist nanny state is not just concerned with what you say in your own home, they want to regulate what you think inside your head also. That can really cause your more unanticipated thought pattern to distract from your normal private thinking, because you cannot even think your private thoughts without knowing they will be reviewed for you by rapist morons. Next, the possibility of magician-like illusions to deceive victims. The technology for thought inference does exist, but it is important to keep in mind the ways in which magician-like deception operations can be applied to a person to make it seem to them that their mind is being read, while some victims' thoughts are read. All of these techniques have likely been tested on non-consenting American citizens. The classic example is where the magician first subliminally inserts a thought into a victim's brain and then later the magician reveals what the person was thinking, by waving his hands and strongly suggesting to the victim that his thoughts are being read. The victim sees the phony evidence and tends to believe that is what is happening. The outrage, indignation, and terror responses the victim is feeling will also tend to interfere with his or her reasoning processes. Advanced profiling and prediction, based on standard surveillance techniques, is another possible means for deceiving a person into thinking their mind is being read. While some victims have undoubtedly had such deceptions inflicted on them, the black-budget torturers, before they will admit the true extent of technological advancement, will likely try to claim this is what was done in all cases. Purposefully setting up the illusion of mind reading on a victim, though, is every bit as despicable and criminal as actually doing it. The setup for the elementary example above can be carried out with only a basic voice-to-skull projection device with the victim in range for some period of time. Suppose you wanted the victim to think about blue violets, for example. You could beam at the victim very quiet suggestions of blue violet. You could send them a song that they thought just got stuck in their heads. You could use voice cloning technology and try to fake their own voice in their head. Another technique is to transmit a word or phrase that is closely associated with what you want the victim to think about or do, and let their brain's associative memory do the rest. Now, after the subliminal send, the tension and drama build until the sadist magician culminates this particular deception operation against the mark of a human being. The magician sends an email to, say, a public mailing list the victim is known to read. In the text of the message, the magician works in the phrase blue violet, perhaps combined with a subtle threat. The above example is only the most elementary. What if two victims were interacting? How could a pair of them be manipulated? The variations include two non-consensual victims, or a consensual harasser messing with a non-consensual victim. There are also witting and unwitting victims. Some have figured out parts of what is going on intended or not, while others have not. Some have been purposely duped into misinterpreting what is going on. They may think they are psychic, for example. What about wide field projection devices? If two interacting people are given the same subliminal stimuli, how might they interpret it? If you weren't paying close attention, would you know if you were the sender or the receiver? Especially if the manipulation continued for a long period without your awareness, perhaps even from childhood. When PTSD is purposely induced, the victim is that much more susceptible. Then you can consider the case where there are far more than two victims interacting, a society of would-be slave masters and those they would hold as slaves. The general situation involves multiple victims and multiple perpetrators, all interacting. There are many different scenarios. I even considered writing an academic paper on the topic, something like mind control games people play. Suppose you assume a particular set of technologies is available. What logically follows from that? It is like science fiction, except that the reality these days is beyond science fiction. It is amazing the hideous sorts of operations that are possible with only your basic secret video/audio surveillance of an individual. Now assume that a targetable voice projection device exists. What could the people controlling it do in the worst case? On our next episode, The Real-Time Idiot and the Autopig. Visit www.targetedindividualscanada.wordpress.com for more information.